The next topic goes to the heart of planning a thoughtful breeding program, pedigree analysis. As breeders, we all navigate the balance between what we see in front of us and what's behind the dog, genotype versus phenotype.
We have a horse race today.
Today, we want to dig into how you interpret a pedigree,
Oh, somebody's running now.
the traits you chase or avoid, and how you make tough decisions with long-term vision in mind. Nancy, let's start with you. How did you first learn to analyze pedigrees beyond names and titles? We'll go from there.
You know, I don't know. Everything, you know, it all comes together. It's a big mash. But I do remember going to like the Maryland seminars, and they used to have them outside at Debbie Smart's, and all the breeders that were successful at that time would go, and we'd sit under the trees and they talk about their dogs and pedigrees. And then I realized it's like, you know, pedigree, you think that's important because you go like, oh, this, you know, I'm going to breed to a champion. And it's like, that is like, it's just a word. Unless you can read that word and visualize what it represents. And if there's certain names, you know, and I'm so glad that Debbie's bringing up Preview, because he was really so important to my breeding program too. But when if I read his name on a pedigree, I think about like his beautiful back, his beautiful profile with the stop exactly in the right place. And, you know, there was things about him, because I saw him as a puppy and saw him as a mature dog. And the lessons that he taught me was like, they are always evolving. And he had a more beautiful eye and expression and a cleaner head as a mature dog. And it's like, you kind of have to balance when you decide that you're going to judge them. Because if you judge him at 10 months and the things that were yet to mature on him were there, I mean, they were there, but would you ever use him? No, you know, seeing him then and never looking at it again. So, I don't, you know, it's a continuum. So you have to remember everything about them. You have to remember stages. You have to remember like their virtues that stick in your mind. But those, you know, when I see a name, it's a movie. You know, it's not a picture. So that's my answer. I mean,
Carrie?
you see them a lot of times, right? You see them a lot of times in different situations and stuff, and so that, you know, creates, you know, the you know, your their little place in your brain that they get to occupy.
Carrie?
So when I first learned about pedigrees and looking at pedigrees, you know, my mother was handwriting them all out.
Yep.
And she had a phenomenal memory for dogs. But as she would write out the names, I could ask her, well, tell me about that dog. She could describe that dog better than probably a photograph. And I think, you know, I see all the pedigrees out there that have all the pictures by all the dogs. I kind of prefer to not have that. Because it makes me think about what do I know about that dog or what it's produced. And if I don't know, I'll go find it. I can go down rabbit holes really easy when I start looking at pedigrees, because I'm going to expand a little bit further than just the, you know, 4 or 5 generations that are on that pedigree. In most cases, if it's a consideration I'm making, you know, in terms of a breeding. And I love to look at pedigrees that are not even dogs I'm interested in, because I like to see combinations and what did those combinations do or not do. So sometimes it's interesting to look them just as research, even if it's not a dog that you're thinking you're necessarily going to breed to, but you see something go, okay, can I figure out where that came from?
Okay, great. Roxann?
I guess I don't look at pedigrees as much as I look at a dog that I want to breed to, but I do go look at their pedigree. But in the beginning, when I first started, I actually went through magazines and stuff because we didn't have the internet. And I would cut out the pictures of the dogs that were in that pedigree. And I had this huge board that had pictures of all of the dogs in the pedigree of my dogs. And then I did the same thing when I bred to Piper. I made this little picture pedigree, which Carrie doesn't like, but, but I also, but as time went on, I didn't do that anymore because it started to ingrain in my mind the different dogs in the pedigree and what they looked like and what those dogs had produced. And I think that's how I look at a pedigree. And now that I judge, if I see a dog that I really like, I go look at that dog's pedigree after I've judged it and put it up, because I'm curious what produced that dog. And there have been several that generations back go back to my family or to other families that I always admired. And it's like, oh, that's why I liked that dog so much. You know, so I think that's how I would use pedigrees. I don't know how to tell someone just beginning to use a pedigree other than when you see unless it is just to go, if that dog is no longer living, go find photos of that dog, go find photos of what that dog produced farther down in, you know, in that generation. What did that dog produce? And, you know, that's kind of going to give you the history of those different families and how they came about. It's easier to do now because we have the internet. You can almost always find a picture of a dog by typing in their name. But not the older dogs. Those are harder to find.
Yeah. Deb?
Yeah, I'm from the era, like your mom was, handwriting those pedigrees out all the time. I mean, we could just look those
I think we
out.
all did that.
We could just write those out, and we knew the dogs better than a photo. We'd gone over them, and I think that's what's so important about going to the national specialty every year, because it's a gathering of the best dogs in the country, and it gives you an opportunity to actually go over those dogs. And I think that it's really important to go over all those dogs that you're interested in at least 3 generations back, if you can at all possible, which I know is hard. But you can't just go by pictures on Facebook anymore. You've got to get your hands on the dogs, and you have to know those dogs, and you have to know their virtues and their faults, and they all have virtues and faults. And so you have to really see what they have produced as well. If you can, I remember the days when the stud dog class was really filled with studs. I mean,
Yeah.
many stud dogs, and I think the brood bitch class is really important too now. I'm starting to put emphasis on that, how our brood bitches are so important, and having the brood bitch class is smart to watch so that you can see what the offspring look like, and maybe get an opportunity to go over the offspring. So I think it's really important to not just read a pedigree and go by the champions, but go by who they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
What they actually are, and what virtues they possess, and what virtues they can pass on genetically.
Linda, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'll agree with Roxann. When you're judging and you see a dog that you really like, going back to your room and looking up the pedigree to figure out and going, oh, yes, that's why I like that dog.
Oh, I think so
funny
too.
how
I think
consistent
judging,
it is.
yeah, judging has been really helpful for me, especially going around the different parts of the country,
Right.
and seeing the breed type. It's like an education.
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed it. And then you see dogs that you like, one you may not know where it comes from, and look it up later and you see why. Why it had that beautiful fill under the eye, or
Mhm.
whatever you were so admired about the dog. Judging is fun. I like that. Yeah.
You know,
What?
judging is kind of upside down because you almost think, you know what, everybody should come into the sport and get to judge first. You know, you feel those dogs and you see the good ones, and then once you learn how to do it, then you can go breed one. I mean, you could get a vision a whole lot faster if you could judge first.
Yeah, because I don't think anybody tells you in the beginning or shows you in the beginning. Anyway, probably my first 4 or 5 years, no one ever said go over the dog. No one ever said any of that. I just would look at a dog and it's like, oh, I like that dog. Why? I don't know. You know, again, until I met Marcia, I didn't know you should go over the dog and touch their head. And
Right.
I learned so much from them.
I know we still have a pedigree book that's
Marshall,
split down the middle, so the top is the males and the bottom's the females. You can just flip
Oh,
the
yeah.
pages and make.
Oh, that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, we still have one of those. I think John gave it to us, so yeah, pretty cool.
That would be a cool book.
Yeah. When you look at a pedigree, what's the first thing you look for, and then how far back in the pedigree do you look? Any of you, just jump in.
I look at the names of the families and how many generations was that family in that pedigree. And some of the dogs, you already know after you've been in the breed for a while, you know those dogs and you know what they look like. I like to go back as many generations as I can, but it's hard sometimes to find generations going back very far, where years ago, before the internet, everybody hand wrote those. And it was easier to sometimes trace all of the pedigrees back because they were handwritten, and I don't know. I think it's harder now. A lot of pedigrees are so intermingled with the same dogs. The ones that are successful, when you go look at those pedigrees, a lot of them have the same dogs within those pedigrees, maybe 4 generations back, but that's interesting to me. I probably didn't answer your question.
Sure you did.
What was the question? I didn't quite get it.
When you look at a
Get the
pedigree, what's the first thing you look for, and then how far back do you go in the pedigree?
Well, I guess like Roxann said, you look for families that you're familiar with and patterns of breeding. Like, was it a half brother, half sister breeding that created the stud dog you're looking at? Was it a mother-son breeding? Was it an outcross? So you look to see how that combination ended up with that particular dog that you're considering and what they produced. I think it's really important what they produced.
Okay.
But I just have fun looking back and seeing things tie in. Even way back, you'll see that they did a tight breeding.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly always start at the grandparents and go backwards. I don't even look at the immediate parents. I think the grandparents really I have found a very big impact. Like 2 generations down is where that's
absolutely, yeah,
where the virtues are coming from a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a seminar that Pat Trotter did, and she talked a lot about even 2 generations back on the grandmother, on the bitch side, what is done there, what clicks there.
Yes.
2 generations back.
Those dams,
Yeah. Yeah.
Those dams are so important.
And I think
exactly what I look at, Linda. Like, grandparents, to me, I want to see like what's consistent. And from looking at a grandparent standpoint, you probably can identify other dogs that those dogs produced, because they're a little bit older, they've had more opportunity, and a lot of times you'll find there's ROMs in that area on some of these dogs that are used so much. But the funny thing is, as grandparents, I'm concentrating on the bitches.
Right.
I'm going to go back one more generation. Is there a beautiful bitch that's there? Because I believe in that dominance and that tail, that you need to, follow those bitches as well. The sires only do so much, and particularly when we have a limited number of sires that we're using. But I almost always, when I go back great grandparents, I'm looking at the bitches that are on there.
You know,
Do they have some of those, those virtues that I'm looking to keep or introduce? Usually keep.
that's that's the thing, is like this beautiful bitch thing, and Debbie Holland like totally believes in it too. But you can pay $1,500 and breed to any sire in the country you want to breed to, and anybody can do that. But what gives you your identity is the bitch side, because like that's the differentiation there. It's from your bitch and your vision. That's you, because anybody can breed to those dogs. So, the other thing, like when I look at a pedigree, I like to see if there's a concentration, like Debbie said. It's like, what dog did they concentrate on, and did those dogs have those virtues? Did they actually possess the virtues that family is known for? And that other, it's about the dog. And collies are hard because the things that we want to preserve are recessives. So it's really easy to lose those things. But, the gladiator had a little brother, so he had the same piece of paper, but he wasn't dominant. I mean, and he was. I mean, you think all these greats, Silverhope Raider probably had a little brother, and some brothers and mothers and sisters and stuff were dominant, but I mean, it's the one individual. It's and they have to have it in the family. But if they didn't inherit those characteristics, they're not going to pass them on. So that's just something I see.
Very important.
I wish that we
if
had
you look
more.
back 3 generations.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Linda. Go ahead.
Haven't gotten into horse racing the last couple of years, but they write articles about the going back in their pedigrees. The way they examine the pedigrees on the horses is fascinating, and there are articles in magazines about all the generations back, and it's very interesting to see the click. You start seeing the clicks, in horses. I don't think we celebrate the pedigrees as much as the horse people do. I mean, they are very into what kind of racing and how they did.
Like if they like dirt or
They're
or
into
grass.
dirt or grass or certain kind of races, length, sprinters, whatever. But they go back and they examine each person. I mean, I'm always sending them to Debbie, but they're fascinating to read, and I wish we did that more in dogs. But I don't know who wants to do that.
Sounds like you volunteered.
No.
Well, it's interesting in horses. I don't know horses like you do, Linda, but how they do that. I mean, they go back and they look at everything like stamina and
Right.
their progeny. I mean, it's interesting. Stamina or sport or showmanship in a collie, is important to look at too, and things like that. Yeah. They look at a lot more when they look at a pedigree, like you said.
There are people that make millions of dollars just studying horse pedigrees and telling people where to breed them.
It's interesting because like this is just something I think, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it's just a perception. Like horses, like thoroughbred race horses or dairy cattle, say, are almost at their peak of evolution, right? Because like there has been very, very few track records set since Secretariat, and that was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And they are not able to, even with great nutrition and physiology and all the science we have now, they have not been able to elevate much past that. Same thing with like dairy cattle. Like once you get that udder so big, it's not going to survive. Same thing with racehorses. You can breed them really light so they'd be fast, but then they break, or they're heavier, so they're slow. So they're kind of like where they're going to be until they think of something else.
Well, it's kind of like balancing our head qualities.
Right, but I think like with the collies, I think after seeing so many really good ones, I think, oh, you know what, we might be 70 or 80% of the evolution where we could be. You know, I don't know what y'all would say. I mean, how good do you think we are, and how much room do we have for improvement?
I think because there's so many shows and the point scale is so low, I think it really has affect not just collies, but every breed to mediocre dogs and not great dogs. Because when you had to defeat 30 or 35 bitches to get a 3-point major, you had to have the best bitch there. You had to be breeding good dogs, or you would never have won.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And we don't, the breed, it's not done that way anymore.
I mean, I think our great dogs now are probably as great or greater than the great dogs of history. And I go back and look at the videos and like, oh yeah, that one's like a lot better. But we don't have as many. It's like the population.
I think we've improved, but we don't have the same number of great dogs that we had. We have a handful of great dogs, and that's who everybody breeds to because they are better. And so now all of the pedigrees are basically intermingled, and there's very few true families that you can go back to get a certain virtue. Like back,
I think, yeah, and I think that very few people keep males these days. I've noticed.
Right.
Too.
well, even bitches. Your
They don't
bitches are
keep
going to
a
make you
good
too.
stud force. Huh? Yeah, but they don't keep a good stud force. So, and there's so few great ones. Whereas before, I just remember, you know, at CC of A's, you'd have like 10 male specials out there that are all beautiful. But I think we have improved, like Nancy was saying, as far as the quality, just less of it.
Yeah.
Less of it, yeah.
So, genotype or phenotype? Which way you going on your thoughts?
I think you have to do both.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you have to do both. I can't do one or the other because I do both. I think you always have to think about phenotype though. Otherwise you're breeding apples to oranges. But you know, phenotype. I've had some successful breedings with phenotype. We've had to outcross a couple of. I think outcrossing is important, and I think when you do outcross, you do have to go to similar phenotype.
And I think if you're doing an outcross,
I guess if we're gonna look at pedigrees, an example of that would be Latin Samba bred to Brocade. I did this breeding because, well, I'll be honest, I'd been raising kids. I'd always kept my line coming down from silver screen with the tartan side in it, and I still retained that. But I knew that if I was going to fast forward, wanted to catch up, I went out. I asked John if he'd let me have Brocade as a puppy, and he agreed to share her with me. Thank goodness. And she came from a very beautiful litter, multiple champions, sired by Bowen. And she was a cute dog, and so I went out in search of a sire for her. Went to the CC of A that year that Latin Dancer went winner's bitch. Okay. And this is Alex. I don't know if it's the best picture of him, but he was prettier than that. But his dam was stunning to me, and and she was similar to some of the tartan-side dogs. She had the curves, she had the neck, she had the expression, especially the expression that I liked. So I acquired Alex from Lenhart, and I picked him out as a 7-week-old puppy after the national in Connecticut that year. I forget what year that was, but I didn't just go and do it. I studied their dogs at that show because I think I only came to the national with one dog. So Moret and I went over there to their setup, and they took every single dog out for me and gated it for me and let me go over. I went over all the brothers, all the relatives, and I actually watched them go in the ring. They were all, you know, had really excellent temperament. They all showed beautifully, and I was so impressed. And then when we went over there to the house after the national, Alex was this puppy kind of sitting in the back, and I said, I'd like to have that one. And they let me have him. And so, you know, so that worked out really well. That was phenotype to phenotype somewhat. You know, foolproof, had beautiful elegance to her. So, you know, they were similar, but it was definitely an outcross. And then there's Deborah up in the top corner. That's his pedigree, actually. And Coldplay. So I think that was a successful outcross. And then I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
Deb, what was your thoughts? I was curious on like an outcross, then the next breeding, basically like Endeavor and Coldplay. Like, do you then go back to like your family of dogs, or just how many
we went
of
back,
outcrosses?
we went back, I went for several generations with what we had, and then I went back and acquired Kaysen from Mike, co-owned him with Mike. And there was a reason why I did that. There's a reason that it wasn't just to get a puppy, but Mike had leased champion Orioles, rumor has it, who was one of my top producers, actually. She's the dam of 9 champions, and she was very elegant and very pretty. And I didn't know who she was going to breed her to, but I thought if she did that. And so Kaysen was the result of a frozen semen breeding, and Honey came through once again and had 10 puppies for Mike. So she was a great producer. And so, but there was a reason that I went back into the pedigree, because see, I don't think people realize that Brocade was a Bowen daughter. And so it was going back in the pedigree to tighten it back up.
You know, one of the things I was going to say, if we do outcrosses, it's generally because we've, you know, with such a genetically type bitch that, you know, the only time that and it wasn't even a strong outcross, but I had a Lucky Strike daughter that I had nothing else at home to breed her to continue with just a, you know, a straight harness. I'm trying to even think. So she was fairly young, and I judged a puppy match in New Jersey, and I put up this little sable puppy of John's. I don't even think John handled it. I think somebody else did. So we're taking pictures, and I said to John, I'm like, well, you know, pretty puppy. He was, you know, probably like 5 months old. Who's his daddy? And so he said, well, you know, I have this tri dog at home. Nobody's really seen him. He was about 3 years old, and he brought him out to shows after that, and that was Tour de Force. And I happened to have this young bitch at a show where he had Tour de Force out when he was first bringing him out, and Tour de Force finished pretty quickly once he brought him out, and the two are on tables next to each other, and I just kept looking back and forth between the two going, he has that, she needs that. It was kind of like, you know, I figured before the end of the day, I'm gonna, you know, this is my next breeding. Which, you know, ultimately turned out to be a great breeding. That's where Sentimental Journey came from, and there were 2 others that finished from that litter. But, you know, that, not that it was really an outcross, but it wasn't something that there was, you know, family in there. It's just they were very phenotypically, as you look back through the pedigree, phenotypically there were some things there. And I just wanted what I saw in that puppy that I judged that was 5 months old. I wanted some of that in my next litter. And I know John said when I went to the breeding, you sure you don't want to breed to the son? And I went, no, I can see what dad's produced. I want to breed to dad. So,
Told us that.
sometimes you have to, but then I would take, you know, what was produced from that and try to go back into my own line and reinforce those things that were really important. But I, you know, certainly kept the Marnus look, even with doing that little bit of stretch out with selection and what you kept.
Great. Roxann?
Well, probably the only outcross that I did I did several outcrosses, but I didn't end up keeping anything from them for different reasons. But the outcross that I did do at one point when I was handling, I would handle dogs for Marcy Fine quite often. And she had a tribe bitch that she sent to me, and it was Overland Toy Box. And she was such a beautiful bitch and had such pretty curves and a pretty face and stuff. And so I called Marcy and I said, can I breed her to Hayden? And so we kind of made a deal that I would finish her and then I could have a litter from her. And that was kind of the deal that we made. And that produced Lisa. Everything that we bred Lisa to, I can't even remember all the dogs that I bred her to because she had several litters. But she could never, she was never a great producer. Hayden was always a good producer, but Lisa wasn't. And loved her. She was a beautiful bitch, but she could never really reproduce herself or better than herself. And I always found that almost true with Hayden too. I would say Lisa was probably the prettiest bitch that he produced. But that was probably the only real outcross that I did, that I kept something that still looked like our family. Because if I did an outcross and it didn't click, I just didn't keep anything. And I probably didn't breed as many litters as Marnus did, or as Debbie or Nancy did. So that was my.
Beautiful bitch.
Thank you.
She was beautiful.
She was beautiful. She produced pretty puppies, but nothing that was ever, I guess once you get, I don't know how to say that, once you get those dogs, it's hard to want to keep something of lesser quality to continue with. If that makes sense. Anyway, that's how I always felt.
Do you think, Roxann, that's because those virtues are all recessive?
I think so. I think I bred myself too close to my family. And then as they all got older, I lost what I had.
Right, because they're like homozygous for that, and it's never going to show.
Exactly. And I know that now, but back then, I didn't know until I had bred away from the things that were most important to me, and I lost that. And that's probably why I'm where I'm at now. I haven't, in judging, I haven't found a bitch that I want to buy yet, and that's sad.
Nancy?
So outcrosses, it's interesting, the phenotype and the genotype, because with collies, even though they're like really different, well, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and some families always blended, like, like the Milas dogs seem to carry their virtues into like any breeding. They have these beautiful outlines in the coat and the presence and the long heads, but they also, let like the other side of the pedigree come through. So they've kind of changed the breed, and they've kind of been important worldwide. And I don't know if it's because those things are dominants or what, but we line breed because we know those virtues are concentrated in that family.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a short, it's not a shortcut, but it's like what you know. But I also think, like, if you're smart or clever or lucky.
Lucky.
Right, more like lucky. You can do an outcross, and those genes can come together in your puppy just the same as if you did line breeding. It's just harder to identify them, because sometimes you might have to try 3 or 4 times to make that work. So I don't know. And it's funny. There's dogs, and I don't know if I want to say who they are, but they kind of came on the scene and without much pedigree. and they ended up being really good producers. So, I mean, how does that happen? And I'll just say, all right, I'll say Seattle Slew, who did not have a great pedigree, but he was really fast and he won the Triple Crown, and he ended up being such an influential sire with really not much of a pedigree. And people kind of like hang on that. And I don't think you can do that. I mean, I think he's like a fluke, same thing like California Chrome or something. And he was not a producer. But
Nancy, when you say he doesn't have much of a pedigree, what makes you say that?
well, his ancestors were not dominant racehorses, you know. I mean, nobody, he was kind of a fluke. But all right, so this is all right, so what I'm going to say is he hit the lottery, and it's a lot harder to hit the lottery like that on an outcross, because that's just luck. And if you're doing the line breeding, you know, you have that concentration of those characteristics generations and generations back. So you can hit the same combination, but it's just luck. And it happens. And this, you know, new lines get started. And I'm thinking about a sire that was really dominant and for the same virtues, like in all of his offspring. And it was like they didn't look like him, but they looked alike. And you know, it was kind of amazing. It was like, how do they do that? And Moret did something, Moret Hallinan with the Napier dogs. Like, I think 3 people in the planet were able to make Brahmin and Parador work together. They were just distinct families, and when you bred them together, they, you know, they just didn't have the virtues of either family. But what she did was when she bred the daughter of Pebblebrook's Twin Creek Affair to Paradise. Long Came Jones. You know, it changed my life actually. But you know, it was, and all of my dogs come down from that breeding. So that was a nick that happened, and you know, I wish more people had kind of used that, and it just, you know, didn't work out that way. But it was interesting that they had the virtues of both families. I mean, they had the beautiful coats and the curves and stuff of the Brahmin side, but they also had the soundness and the temperament of the Prater side. And I just thought it was just genius to like try it and then recognize it. And it was like the one that was, you know, mostly in my head is Liberty Fanfare, but there was like 3 in that litter. There was a tri-dog, and there was also a sable bitch Joe Reno had. That's his foundation. So they built that on that outcross, and all of Joe's dogs go back to that, and they've been successful, very successful for generations and generations. So, you know, you just kind of have to try stuff sometimes, you know, or to follow your gut. We would have just, where would we be without those dogs, you know? This was a little bit of an outcross because Breathless was by Dangerous Liaison. It was by a Parador dog. And I don't have his, maybe I can get a pedigree and send it to you. But they both had, Preview and his mother, and Preview and Breathless were both out of Critics' Choice Daughters. But Preview was by a different dog that had some outcrosses to some Lick Creek. And that was a really, that was a nice nick, and some of Judy Klosterman's dogs went back to that, and they kind of had the blend that all the pretty came in from the blend, and a lot of star dogs are like that. But you can see, all right, so Breathless didn't have a great back. She's a little, you know, a little longer in body. Didn't have the coat. That was the day she finished. So I mean, that's about all she ever got. But you can see, like, Preview wasn't this short back, but he was better there. And what you can't see in Breathless is like she was off in profile. She didn't have the skull. But together, you know, well, this one kind of got the pretty from both sides. I mean, she's Blush ended up with, you know, his top line and his profile and her temperament and showmanship. And, you know, it was just every now and then, you know, one of them hits, and she ended up being a really good producer too.
Yeah, she was beautiful. And then I loved Preview. Of course, I bred Preview too.
I mean, see how, like, she looks like Preview when she's 8 months old.
Mhm.
Pretty bitch.
Very pretty.
Fun. All right. How about tell us about a time where you did a breeding and maybe like it didn't go the way you thought it was going to go, or what did you learn from that breeding?
Who wants to start?
Which one?
Well, I guess I could start. There's one breeding I did, and I'm not going to use names. But if you want to pull up Champion Oriolis blueprint, there's a photo. I think you have a photo of him. In my breeding programs, whenever I needed an outcross, I would always take my tightly bred Parader line, basically, and breed it to Brandwin. So I've done it a couple of times, made it work. But anyway, this particular time it did not work. And he's a very elegant dog. He actually took best of breed under Marcia Keller at this show. And and Sue Symington, they gave him breed. He was a beautiful headed dog. Problem is, he was pretty. I lost in this breeding, I lost temperament and I got aggression and other medical issues that we had to work around after that. So we've all had a bad breeding. But he was a pretty dog. He didn't particularly have bad, he had good temperament. It was the litter mates that didn't have good temperament. And that's not tolerable around here. So that was a mistake. So we've all had our bad breedings, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Debbie, like, wasn't he like the one? You know, he was the one you wanted you did the breeding for, and he carried forward. So those other ones, you know, they didn't have it, but they didn't, right? So he was kind of like the bingo one that you were looking for.
The bingo one, right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's kind of like what you were saying, Nancy. It's just you have to try things. So you run into those things. And even if we don't get what we want, if you learn something, then that's probably the thing that you gained is something that you learned.
Right. That was kind of an experiment, I guess. So.
Anybody else do a breeding that didn't work out for them?
Like everybody did. I did a couple breedings. And and they produced pretty puppies that I liked, but I couldn't deal with the temperament. So I placed all of them because I just couldn't deal with it. They couldn't even eat together, or they couldn't run and play together. I just couldn't deal with that. And as they got older, I'm like, I can't do this. I would never breed that. So we ended up placing them as family pets, even though they were pretty. And I'm not going to say what family we bred to, but I was quite devastated because it did produce pretty puppies and I didn't keep any of them.
Yeah.
Same thing Debbie had. No, it's not.
We just produce nice
Yes. Yeah.
family.
Well, even when I placed them, it's like I wanted to make sure they were the only pet.
Only pet.
And that the people knew that, you know, that they were food aggressive and other than they weren't like bad dogs. They were just food aggressive, and sometimes just out of nowhere they would like get into little tiffs. And this is like when they were 12-week-old puppies, and it's like, what? So I think we all have those. You do if you've done it long enough.
Yep.
Right.
You learn, you move
It
on.
happens. Yeah.
What are some of the 2 to 3 traits? I mean, as we've all kind of said, we can't get it all, but how do you focus in on a breeding? The 2 to 3 traits maybe that you think about when you go to breed. Definitely talked about temperament a little bit, but do you have a few on the top of your mind when you go for it?
Well, I would never breed a dog that didn't have a good temperament. And that was not in good condition and a sound dog. By that, I mean, they move well, they stop well, they have a correct head and expression. I would say expression type and temperament are my top priorities.
Mine too.
Yep.
I have to have expression. Number
Yeah.
one.
I have to be
If I
able to look at
a-
them every day.
Right. If I look in a dog's face and it doesn't have the right eye placement and the correct expression, the sweetness, I have a real hard time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a priority to have that, and temperament, of course. You have to have good temperament. They have to be able to get along, these dogs here too. So we can't have aggression.
Well, it's not a collie. They aren't terriers, they're collies.
No, it's just not the right. They're herding dogs, so they had to work with each other. That doesn't.
And the
that's not
ones
gonna be
that do
suitable for
have,
them.
from handling, the ones that do have correct temperament are so much easier to train and handle and show. I mean, through our years of when I handled for like 10 years, there were people that would send me dogs to show and I would ship them back. I'm like, I can't show your dog. I can't. And because the dogs were either skittish or they were just freaked out when they got here, and I would keep them for, a couple of weeks and work with them, and they could never overcome that. And we would take them to shows and try to socialize them. And it's like, I can't show your dog, and I would ship them back.
And that's something I was going to bring up.
Carrie, do you have anything to add? By Deb?
No, I mean, basically, I think Roxann and I think the same lines because we're sisters. But, expression has to be there. That whole eye placement. I know how many generations it's going to take me to breed that eye placement where I want it to be if it's not there. So that's one thing I don't tolerate. I've kept some beautiful little puppy bitches, and at 5 months they fill in that eye, and I'm like, nope, you know what, that bone's not going away, and I can't breed this away in one generation. And they become wonderful family pets for somebody, and I start over because it's too difficult. There's too many components that go into having that eye placement where it pleases me and where I think it should be. And obviously temperament, where you've got a group of dogs, not only do I want them to bring them in the house and be able to live with them, but I want to be able to turn them out in the yard and they're fine as well. So I think that's, and soundness. I love watching a sound dog just run in my yard. It's just, it's heaven. So you want to be able to see that.
You said something about, how many generations it's going to take to correct the eye placement.
If it's more than one, actually in that one, I don't know how many it is. I just know there's too many components that go into that I can't just pick a stud dog over here and breed her to him and go, yeah, it's going to correct it. So I just don't tolerate it. It's just,
Do you have thoughts though on things that are easier to fix in a generation and things that are harder?
It depends. I think within your own line that there are things that you can fix, and there's things that I thank my mother every day for being so diligent about producing good back skulls. Because I don't think in 20 years I've really ever thought about a back skull not being flat and up and at a young age, and it just improves with age. But she worked really hard to get to that point where it was something that was very solidified. So those are some things I don't necessarily think about. I just kind of assume it's always going to be there. Not that I'm going to breed to something that doesn't have it, because I don't want to lose it. But yeah, it's all Mother Nature sometimes. You can have your best plans and say, oh, this is the perfect match. And genetically that something else happens that it doesn't happen that way. So you take the best that you got, and if it's something you can work with, you move on. And if it's not, you try again.
Over.
Well, that's why it's important when you look at a pedigree to see, look at the grandparents and the as many generations as you can go back, to see what kind of expression they had, because
Can I
as we
share?
all know,
Pedigree.
expressions vary, you know, interpretation of what good expression varies. Nancy, as you
Yeah.
were talking about interpretation of the standard. I think a lot of people have, I mean, I think like-minded people, we kind of know what a sweet face is, sweet expression is, and correct eye placement, but I think a lot of people don't know it. A
Right.
lot of judges don't know it.
I agree.
Because they haven't
I mean,
seen
I'm
it,
just saying.
you know?
a lot
Because
of
they've
judges
never
don't
seen or felt it.
recognize
Right,
They
right.
don't see it, and I'm just bringing that up. Were you going to pull up something, Carrie?
I just wonder if I could share a pedigree or two.
Yeah,
Just a
go for it.
kind of philosophy. Oops. This is the pedigree for Marnus I Am Invincible. And interesting, my only smooth to smooth breeding ever. Okay, so this is Cassidy I Am Invincible. And again, rough that was produced from these two smooths. So way back in 2010, the last national that Mom went to, Kings Valley Demure, Here I Am, really caught her eye. And I can remember going back to the hotel that night, and she's like, I need to know what's behind that dog. So of course we had to pull up the pedigree and look and see. And you know, lo and behold, there's Golden Ruler.
Yep. I remember when you did that breeding.
Bowen's Island, and okay, it all makes sense. So, you know, long trip back from California, driving back, my parents had discussion about, you know, I wonder if there's somewhere that we can use him. You know, this is something that he had the virtues, and yeah, it's a smooth, but so the following year, knowing that Cameron was on the East Coast still with Diane Steele, we took a Lucky Strike daughter, Marnus a Kiss for Luck, and bred to Cameron. She only had 3 puppies. There was a smooth male that finished like at 10 months. And this little smooth bitch, she wasn't a showstopper as a puppy. So I actually sent her out with Leslie Rappaport for probably a year and a half. She had a litter out there, and I said, you know, I think I want her back so I can have a litter. And I came back and like fell in love with her. She was beautiful. She didn't like shows, but we endured, and she finished pretty quickly once we got out to shows. And then I was like, okay, now what do I do to breed her? Because I really I didn't know what I wanted to do. And really it was the sire, Sam I Am, was really looking, this is one where I did kind of look at pedigree and went, you know what, there are things in here that I want to keep going with. So Hayden Golden Warrior was in the grandparents, head, skull, expression, know the body. Give my regards, expression, head. There's things here. I like this. Oh, look, here's Anthony. Yeah, here we go again. There's things here. And then my own dog, so I have Lucky Strike. And I just somehow felt that there was something in here that I wanted to capture. She had pretty puppies. You know, like I think 3 finished from that litter. But they just didn't have the eye. Katie's eye, although it looks really pretty here, was a little more open. I don't think Sam's eye was his best thing. But the interesting thing was then knowing that this was all behind, what do I do next? And I would not have this bitch today if I hadn't had that smooth bitch and made that breeding, because I was able to do on Cassidy's last litter, take her to Wesley, and now look at where I am on grandparents. So I really think here grandparents are dogs I admired, I really liked, and I got back and look at there's those grandparents again. And somehow all of that is starting to, you know, to come through and give me the head, the expression, but also the outline that I'm looking for, a little more elegance. So sometimes, you never know where it's going to start from, but man, I keep thinking I'm so glad that we did that breeding and I had that smooth bitch here and I kept going. And, I tried breeding her a few different ways and it didn't always work. But this one gave me something that really gave me a kind of stepping stone to get to where I thought I could keep going.
I find it interesting that the pedigree after this one, the other bitch, has dogs from all 4 of us that are talking today's family.
I actually saw that yesterday when I pulled this up.
We just said that.
Look at that.
Wow, that's just so interesting to me.
Yes, it does. And I thank you all.
Pedigree. Oh.
That was an example.
I wouldn't mind
Just looking
bringing,
at the
I
data.
wouldn't mind bringing up a pedigree of Silver Screen,
Sure.
even though he's long gone. Love that dog. But it was an interesting pedigree thing. Silver Screen, it's never got great pictures of him. He had a beautiful expression. Anyway, he was an interesting breeding. If you look at the pedigree, you have apparently as motion picture sire, okay? And then he goes back to heir apparent twice. So it's a half brother, half sister breeding that produced motion picture. And then if you look at skylarking and all my old dogs that are in here, well, the inheritor was a gladiator son. So you have to go back far in the pedigree to realize how tight this breeding really was. If you go back, you have to look back far. But you have the inheritor who's by the gladiator. You have Glen Echo Setha Style, who was winner's dog at the 1979 CCVA, who was a gladiator son. And you don't know that unless you know what's back here. You have Savannah, who was a gladiator granddaughter, and then you have skylarking again on the bottom. So it's actually very tightly bred. But you wouldn't know it by looking at the pedigree. That's why I'm pointing it out.
Yeah.
So you really have to go back quite a few generations to see that sometimes, for people to see that. Interesting, isn't it?
It is, because most pedigrees, unless you do your research, you can't go back any farther. That's because they're just not presented that way.
You would never know that Champion Orioles Damascus was double tartanside on both sides, not from reading it. And then this particular breeding went on to, because then Danny subsequently with Country View Collies bred to Champion Country View Admission. And then that ended up producing Champion Country View Colorful. And the Twin City Collies and the Windlair Collies launched after that. So it was interesting how there's a trickle-down effect. Thought I'd point that out. Yeah.
Where do you personally draw the line when it comes to breeding to a dog with known issues?
I would never breed to it.
So, I mean,
That's an easy one for me. I wouldn't breed to it if I knew it had problems.
colobomas, none of that.
Nope,
missing
nope,
teeth.
nope. I wouldn't even keep ones that had colobomas or anything that had a hereditary defect that could be passed on the next generation. I guess that's just me. I feel like once you do that, you're always going to have that problem. And why do you want to do that to the breed? I don't care if it's the best dog that you've ever bred. If it has a genetic defect, why would you continue to breed to that?
Okay.
That's just me, though. I know other people do it. I just don't. Or never have.
How about the rest of you?
It depends on what it is, and there's things, I'll tell you what, there's things that I won't tolerate. Well, I do tolerate and I hate them because I have to, but that they're not even aware of, they don't even think. Like, to me, one of the worst problems in the breed right now is these mouths with these base narrow canines. And I find that like a worse defect than a coloboma, because those canines stick up in the roof of the mouth. It causes all these problems. with infections. The dog can't close its mouth. It doesn't eat right. It's like slops its water bucket everywhere. And, it's funny because, just got my judge's license, and the AKC now, the way our standard is written, they have these rules. So they only want you to look at the front of the bite. Just lift the nose and look at the front of the bite. But I remember somebody had a conversation with Vaja Bay about scissors bite. And she pulled out her standard, which she always had in her purse. And she said, it means all the way around. And I think that's true. And especially with collies, when we try to breed for, these really long, lean heads, if you're too quick trying to do your fine tuning and you want to improve your short heads by breeding to a long, lean head, well, those two things are inherited different.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get this narrow top skull and this big wide underjaw, and you're going to get inverted molars. It's not even an inverted molar. I mean, I can live with that, but it's like that. That's two different dogs' heads, and it's about impossible to breed out. And and the standard says head faults are very severely penalized. And I'm not going to be a tooth fairy, but it's something we need to pay attention to more. And I don't know how
I agree.
but it's and some of the most beautiful dogs and some of the ones I feed every day, are lacking there. So and the baby with the bathwater, I mean, we've heard it for since we were babies. So there's just you have to use imperfection to get perfection, and that's it's kind of the paradox of breeding dogs. And that's not we do all these OFAs and eye checks and everything. You know what? Anybody could breed a family of MDR1 normal normals and Collie Eye normal in 2 generations.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known breeders that really made that a priority, and they said, I just cannot breed the type that I want to breed. It's too hard. It's and none of us think anything's too hard, or we wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
But it's the eye thing. I mean, you go every now and then you're going to get a really terrible one, and that's terrible. But that's something I could live with. It's like I don't want to live with colobomas, but the choroidal hypoplasia.
I can live with that.
Right. And there's so many other things to put a priority over that's like a level of acceptability. But I would never accept like bad feet or bad structure or some of those things, because that's a quality of life thing. The standard.
It is.
The standard has words. Those words describe a dog that's balanced so that no part of his body is stressed more than the other. The rear angulation, the way the hocks are supposed to be, so they don't get arthritis when they're 7, or their feet are so bad that they break down and they hurt. We want a collie that lives to be 14 and can still climb stairs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like that foundation, and a beautiful head is wasted on a dog that's not good in all those other areas.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely can't be crippled.
Right.
Or one of my pet peeves, a gay tail, like a tail going over the back. That's a no-no to me.
All right. Anything to add on that before we move on to another closing section here? Okay. So what would your advice be for newer breeders? And this could be maybe some advice on how they should be thinking about a pedigree or reading one. It could range for what type of misconceptions do you see new breeders doing and that they should avoid? And then if you have some real thought-provoking advice, what would you go back and tell your younger self? So anything around those types of topics.
My younger self would have been be more outgoing and talk to more people and learn more, and don't be afraid of asking questions. because I think when you're new and you start, I think you're intimidated. Anyway, I was intimidated by talking to other people, but I'm a quiet person anyway. Until I know you, then. But I think I would say be more outgoing and pursue talking to the people that you admire their dogs or their family of dogs and learn as much as you can. Did I answer the question right?
Sure. You did.
Yep.
Yeah, new breeders, I think they are intimidated, some of the newer ones, to approach people. And I think that's why these type of seminars are good, because I think they've been asking for them. Some of the new people we're working with, they've been asking for seminars and hands-on, even though they do go to breeders education and judges education at the CCFA. I don't know if it's enough. I mean, I think they need like smaller groups. I think Carrie was talking about that, putting people in smaller groups so they can maybe learn easier, might help. So that's my thought, educating some of the new people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I just continue to encourage people that, don't just look at pictures. You have to go put your hands on as many dogs as you can. I'll be honest with you, I never felt a head that wasn't smooth for years and years and years and years. And like, I was amazed when I went out and started putting my hands on dogs and didn't know that every collie head wasn't clean on the sides and flat on the top. But, it's amazing when you can take somebody and walk with them, whether it's, at the national or at a show, and just watch them go through and put hands on. But, you have to establish a relationship with them that they can be honest with you. They can tell you, and you need to be able to let them know, just tell me what you feel and what you see. If it's my dog, you're not going to hurt my feelings because I know where their faults are. But I need to know if they actually see it, feel it, understand it enough to know, are they going to be able to make a breeding decision that's going to be right for their dog? Do they know the dog that they're looking at, what they own as virtues and what they're looking to improve? Those are the conversations that need to happen to make sure, they're heading in the right direction and they're going to be successful. Somewhere along the line, it might not be the first try because most of us weren't successful on the first try.
No.
Thanks, Carrie. Nancy or Linda?
I don't have any regrets. There's not much. I don't think there's some dogs I would have bred to, but as far as like being in the sport, I don't think I would do anything different because some of the hard lessons were things, you needed to learn those things.
That's true too.
And you can't always anticipate them, but it teaches you to be, a little bit more careful. And, the relationships have been so rich, like with just everybody. And, I had the great mentors. I was able to do, things I wanted to do. Like I wanted to do a magazine. It's like, I don't think that magazine is good enough. I want to do a magazine. And, and the Sunstroms were my mentors there. And they said, oh, don't quit your day job. And it was like, so I'm pretty sure about that. This is good. So Marion Sullivan and I, they were going to start a catalog business, and I had just started a magazine, and we went down to Florida on the Florida circuit, and there was a day off, and it was in Daytona, and there's a town down there close to Daytona, it's Casadega, and it is a town of psychics, and all the snowbirds and stuff would go down there and get their readings and stuff, and Marianne goes like, well, let's go, let's go get our readings and see what, see if we're going to be successful in these businesses. So, we kind of had to probably take the C- psychics because we didn't have appointments. So I said, well, you go first. So we went to this house, and she went in, and it was like a house with like all these bedrooms and, all these different psychics in there. So she went in first, and I sat on the porch, and I was watching the psychics across the street. and they came out of the car and they backed over their garbage cans. So Marion got her reading and I went in and got my reading, and it was like, oh, we're going to go home and quit our jobs. And we did. And because she said, oh yeah, you're going to do great. You'll be fine. You know, people are going to subscribe to it. You'll be just fine. And it's like, you just need a trigger, you know, you have to try stuff. And the thing is once you commit to something, committing to something makes you make it work, you know, or makes you do what it takes to make it work, and have the persistence to get through the hard things, you know, that happen, and figure out what went wrong and how to fix it and stuff. And those, you know, those experiences are as priceless as winning the national, you know, maybe even more pivotal to who you become, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, go to a psychic, believe it. Take back over the garbage cans.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we're gonna call it a wrap and head to lunch. Or is everybody okay with taking a 20-minute break,
Sure.
or 30 if you want
I'll
it?
go let my dogs potty.
How long do you want? You guys want 30 minutes, 20 minutes?
It's up to you. I don't care.
We're good.
All right, well, let's do 30. We'll get everybody fed and dogs walked and stretched and whatever you need to do, and we'll see you all back here.